Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a sequel video to my previous video about Iron Maiden, about why modern Iron Maiden sucks, or 5 reasons. I'm going to give 5 reasons why it rocks. Well, for one, number 5, they still put on a damn good show a lot of the time. I saw them on the Brave New World tour. I saw them on the, what was it called? Somewhere Back in Time. I saw them on the Maiden England tour, and I think that those are the only 3 times I saw them after the reunion. I did see part of a show for Ed Hunter, but how many times have I seen Iron Maiden? Oh, I saw him at Ozfest like once too. There might have been one other time too with the reunion. They still put on a killer show. They still sound better live than on record a lot of the time. I mean, listen to a lot of these modern albums. Book of Souls live I like better than the album because it's a little bit compressed and stuff, but the performances are better in a lot of ways. Bruce's vocals could be better live nowadays, but it still sounds really good. So yeah, I still think they put on a killer show. For some reason, the live thing does not translate to album as well. So number 4, I would say they give a lot of bang for the buck. They're doing these albums that are 90 minutes long or something like that, and there's a lot of music on there. It's like you'll find some real gold in there. There's a lot of nuggets of gold in there, and there's a lot of shit on there too. I mean, just like Book of Souls had some really great songs and some really killer ideas. So they definitely give you more than you bargain for with these super long albums. I mean, there's no denying that. So I'd say number 3, and this is just kind of a thing about similar to what was said before, is their concepts and their lyrical ideas are still very, very entertaining. This Senjutsu had this samurai motif on it, and Final Frontier is more like space travel, and they still have, they capture the imagination in many ways. You have these ideas on these albums. I'd say Dance of Death was kind of lame, especially the cover, but I mean, the concept of Dance of Death was kind of lame. It had some good songs on it, don't get me wrong. Brave New World was great. Matter of Life and Death was pretty cool. Had some cool ideas and stuff. I don't agree with all the ideas that they perpetuate on that album, as far as like, some of the narratives mainstream narratives they had about terrorism and stuff on some of the lyrics. I'm just like, yeah, it's not how it works. But anyways, I want to inject politics into this. I'd explain that in a different video. I could, but good stuff. There's some really good songs, some really good performances. That said, obviously there's a lot of repetitiousness and in certain areas and stuff. I would say, was that number 3? Number 2, there's still a lot of, even within this very sometimes repetitive or sometimes cliched, like playing E minor, in a lot of the songs, not all of them obviously, or not all the parts. There's still a matter of there's still a level of experimentation that is kind of cool. You had Empire of the Clouds, which I think a good producer would take a lot of those ideas and like cement them with the old school ideas and mix them in a better way. But I think Empire of the Clouds, you had The Legacy, which, I believe I think that's the name of the song, which sounded a little more like old school Genesis with the 12-string guitars. You have these little bits and pieces that are really cool, or Satellite 15, stuff like that. I think still challenges the listener to some extent. I think Iron Maiden still has a lot of cool stuff that they do, and that's not meant to be, so like, even though I'm critical of them, I'm critical of a lot of their choices, I still think they're a great band, and they're a hell of a lot better than a lot of bands, what a lot of modern metal bands are doing now, years later in their career too. I just think they could do a lot better, have someone like Jens Bogren or Andy Sneap or someone to kind of like kind of tighten stuff up, or even not even tighten stuff up, but just have a better sonic palette, or better sonics period. So not better sonic palette necessarily, or just like balance out the palette, like Final Frontier. You can have a song that's in E minor and has that bass intro in E minor, like Steve Harris likes to do, and then mix it with the Satellite 15 kind of dissonance, and then have a song, the chorus, like, The Alchemist, just like have these different things together, mix it better, just do a little bit different, more challenging. Even the challenging parts could be not as separate as they are sometimes in modern Maiden. So the last one, number one, well, it still sounds like Iron Maiden. You have these bands that try to sound more modern and try to do all this crap, and Maiden never did that. Maiden never had even a jugulator, which isn't all a bad album, but they never went nu metal, new metal. They never went grunge. Well, except for Bruce Dickinson, arguably on Skunkworks, but that was a solo album, not an Iron Maiden album. They never really tuned down that low, just to sound more modern, except for like some drop D stuff. Adrian Smith is the only one that usually does it in the band, and it's used for songs that are in D anyway, so it just doesn't really make it sound that much different. It's not the whole band tuning down, which I think they probably could have done some of that stuff more, like on Bruce's solo albums, like Chemical Wedding and stuff. They could have brought some of that in there, more of that in there. So they never didn't sound like Iron Maiden. There's no album that sounds like, oh, we have to sound like Korn now, or, we have to have some 7 strings in there, or some gent kind of shit, or some kind of fucking rapping or techno, or, or whatever, or Nirvana sounding song or something like that. It never went that way. It was always Iron Maiden. I mean, that's a testament to the quality. And Metallica went all sorts of directions in the 90s and early 2000s, even though I did defend Saint Anger, but, all sorts of bands went more, even you can criticize, in a certain way, you can criticize a band like Saxon even, and I liked a lot of their modern albums, but they definitely had Bauer Fiend and that German power metal sound, snuck in there quite a bit, right? So it's never, it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing in a way. It's like, well, someone could point and say Saxon kind of tried to appease that audience, that would listen to their early albums, but they're into those power metal stuff now too. But Iron Maiden never did that. They still sound like Iron Maiden. They're negligibly a little heavier than they were in the 80s with the modern amps and stuff and all that kind of stuff. But they never did. They never sold out. They never did groove metal either. Testament, even though most of their albums are great, or Exodus, I'm not saying that it's not even comparable because of thrash metal versus traditional metal, but they never did anything like that. I think even Saxon had a more modern sounding album in the early 2000s. I forgot what it was called, but most of these bands go all these different directions, and Maiden never did. I mean, the X Factor still sounds like Iron Maiden. Virtual 11, for all its criticisms, it sounds like Iron Maiden. They never did that. So, it's a testament to them. Hell, even Motorhead got a little heavier in the late 90s. They had some more drop tuning or down tuning and stuff, a little thrashier, and they still sounded like Motorhead for the most part, but they got a little bit of that in them. So yeah, so I think those are 5 reasons why modern Iron Maiden rocks. They're still my favorite band. They can be criticized. They can have we can criticize a lot of their modern choices, and rightfully so. But at the same time, they still hold a place in metal and with their music. I think Razorfist was right in his review of Senjutsu that, people should not be such lackeys for the band and just such, bootlickers for the huge band that Iron Maiden are. And there's no denying that Iron Maiden are one of the biggest bands in the world, and always were. They have this deceptive, pseudo-subversive quality to them that people think that they're actually some type of rebellious or underground band to some extent, but they really are pretty mainstream if you think about it. It is cool though. I almost like respect that kind of subversive quality that they seem to try to perpetuate, even though they're not really, at the end of the day, that subversive or that underground or that different. I mean, they're different, but they're not. They're the world's biggest cult band in a way. Let's just be honest. I mean, the Misfits are maybe number two, or unless you count Kiss, I don't know. I mean, 2 or 3 of the biggest merchandise bands too, if you think about it. So, yeah. So those are 5 reasons. I'll always love Iron Maiden, anyways, and I'll buy their new albums when they come out, and I'll still criticize them for their choices and for their things. And I wish they would, pull a move like Priest and get a modern producer and try to tighten stuff up and try to really articulate what they're, in a different way. Maybe sound a little bit more modern. Maybe have a little bit of something like on Chemical Wedding, or on Accident of Birth, which is pretty much like that sounded like a good balance between modern and old school. Could have a little bit more of that. I think that would serve them very well, having a better producer or more production, or just better production. It's not even Kevin Shirley's fault, really. But that's about all.